Hi, I'm Duane from Travel by the Book TV, where we explore literary travel. Today I'm in Amherst, Massachusetts at Hampshire College. A quick shout out to my brother Dave, who's an alum from here. I'm here to visit the Yiddish Book Center and to celebrate a literature and a language that was almost lost if it wasn't for the effort of many people, but largely Aaron Lansky. This is his great book, Outwitting History, the amazing adventures of a man who rescued 1 million Yiddish books and founded the Yiddish Book Center. We're going to meet with him and check out this awesome building. Here's a kid's book, The Book Rescuer. How a Mensch from Massachusetts saved Yiddish literature for generations to come. All right, I'm sitting here with the founder of the Yiddish Book Center, Aaron Lansky, author of Outwitting History, and which I thoroughly enjoyed. Before meeting with Mr. Lansky, I got a tour of the book center. Hi, we're in the Yiddish Book Center, and I'm with a fellow Charlotte actor.
Yes.
Who is going to give us a great tour. But while I'm here, tell me about your fellowship. What is that?
Yes, I'm on a year-long bibliography fellowship here at the Yiddish Book Center. So that kind of means I deal with all things books. People donate books, I unpack them, I research rare books, I manage the shelves out in the repository, and any book-related questions just come to me. So this is like the main repository. This is what we call the alphabet of creation. It's like the Hebrew alphabet. And I usually start my tours up here, kind of looking out. That's where I start my spiel,
Okay.
which is a Yiddish word. So, welcome to the Yiddish Book Center. The Yiddish Book Center was formally founded in 1980 by Aaron Lansky. It started when he was a graduate student at McGill University studying comparative literature, and he would get assigned Yiddish novels in his Jewish studies classes. And all the students would rush to the public library in search of these novels in Yiddish, only to find that there was only one copy on the shelf. So the students in his classes would go into Jewish neighborhoods in Montreal and be like, does anyone have this book? And just knock on doors.
Eventually it became apparent to me that Yiddish books were actually being thrown out, that there were still plenty of old Yiddish-speaking Jews around. This is in the 1970s. Still plenty around, but as they died, their kids usually had no interest in the books or the culture, and their grandkids didn't even know what these were or what the language was. It had been such a historical rift by that point. And so I thought, wow, instead of spending yet another semester in school, maybe I ought to take a little time off and go save the world's Yiddish books while there's still a chance to do so. So I went down to New York, and I met with scholars there, and I said, so how many Yiddish, I'm a kid, right? I said, how many Yiddish books do you think are still extant? And they all debated among themselves, and they said, well, maybe 70,000 volumes. I don't really know how they came up with that number, because in retrospect, it's so preposterously wrong, but at the time, that's what they said. So I figured, 70,000 books. I could take a 2-year leave of absence from graduate school and go save all of them, and I should be able to pull that off.
And that thus began the Yiddish Book Center. Collecting never stopped. People did not stop giving him books.
To my amazement, we were just inundated with mail within a few weeks and with books coming in.
So in the early days of the Yiddish Book Center, Yiddish books got shipped from everywhere. So this crate actually was sent from a rabbi in Zimbabwe right here. So it's kind of I think this is
the actual crate.
It's the emblem of Yiddish as a global culture, that even in Zimbabwe, there's Yiddish.
Okay.
And then I started getting letters from people who said, yeah, but I have too many books, or I'm too sick, or I'm too infirm, you have to come and get them. So I borrowed an old van, and I went out on the road myself for the first time and to pick up books. The first stop was down in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and I quickly learned that, wow, there are a lot of books out here.
And to this day, and I can confirm because we still get donations, I opened some this morning, that we have over 1.5 million books in our collection right now. So what you're looking at right here is a super small fraction of what we actually have.
And then for the next maybe 20 years of my life, I lived mostly on the road, rounding up books, building an organization.
And every book you see is for sale with some exceptions. We do have like a core collection, so like if you do want to buy a book, I'll have to like make sure we have enough copies to sell. But this is not a museum. These are not museum objects. You're allowed to touch anything you want.
But somehow that idea of saving books like that, it hit a chord not just with Jews who are a very bookish people, but really with everybody. I think, you know, books are a fundamental human artifact. They tell our stories, and therefore they tell us who we are. And therefore that respect for the written word really goes across cultures. And I think people everywhere responded to this and thought, wow, this is, you know, here's a whole literature that's in danger. Here was a people, a minority people on the outside for several thousand years, people unable to own their own land, without a country of their own for most of that time. You know, people who had always valued books as kind of the source of their own identity. And clearly, and of course, you know, 1 out of every 2 Yiddish speakers was murdered in the Holocaust. So, you know, the idea is a kind of an act of vindication to kind of save these books and make this culture accessible seemed imperative to almost everyone I spoke with.
I like to view these books as like survivors, travelers. They've survived World War II, pogroms, like immigration. They've been ripped hastily off of nightstands and kind of miraculously made their way back here, only to be reunited with like books that were once on the same shelf.
But it quickly became apparent that it wasn't just a matter of saving books, you know, the written word. It was really saving a whole culture and a sensibility and a way of life and a view of the world and looking out from the outside in that really had a great deal, actually I'd say, that had more and more to say as the years went by. You know, that the more dicey our planet became, you know, the more difficult life became for many on this planet, the more the Yiddish as a language of outsiders, you know, had to say.
So I actually have a little exercise that I like to demonstrate how Yiddish sounds. So I have this sign here, and this sign says, Die Bobe macht a cholent auf Shabbos. So this literally translates to the grandmother makes a cholent, which is like a hot stew, off Shabbat or a Sabbath. And I like this sentence, 1, because you can hear me speak Yiddish, and 2, this sentence kind of exemplifies the different linguistic components that comprise Yiddish. So what language of families does the word bobe evoke for you?
Well, for me, Yiddish.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Bubby and Zadie. But if you had to kind of place it in like a contemporary country, where do you think it would be?
Isn't it Slavic?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Slavic, yeah. What does the word Macht evoke for you, or what language of families? German.
German, okay.
That's directly from German. So we got Slavic, Germanic. So cholent, do you speak French by chance?
No.
So the word cholent, you see the word chaud, which is hot in French, and then lentement, which is slowly, and a cholent, which is a type of stew that's cooked for several hours, like it's comprised of the words hot and long. So I like to say that this is kind of the Central European linguistic influences on Yiddish,
Right.
that like a staple food that one would eat every Saturday kind of comes from French.
All right.
Interesting. This last word, Shabbos,
Shabbos is Hebrew.
Hebrew. So you've got the Slavic, the Germanic, the Central European, and the Hebraic influences of Yiddish.
Which
so
really tells us the whole history of
in one
2
sentence.
millennia,
Yeah.
2 millennia of
Jewish history, yes. You'd be surprised how many people come in and are like, oh, you speak Yiddish, like, can you translate this thing my grandmother used to say? And I'm like, sure, lay it on me. And it's like something so profane.
Yeah.
And I'm like, your grandmother, she seemed like an interesting lady. But so these are Yiddish theater posters. So there was a lot of Yiddish theater. It was extremely popular, kind of like avenue for Yiddish expression. In New York, there was a production of Romeo and Juliet put on in Yiddish, kind of during the golden age of Yiddish theater. And like it gets to the climactic scene where Juliet's about to kill herself, and someone in the audience, like an old Jewish woman, like who had survived a bunch of pogroms in Europe, stands up and she was like, you can't throw your life away over a boy, like you don't know real hardship. And everyone in the audience like agreed with her and started booing and throwing fruit at Juliet. So it just goes to show that some things translate linguistically, but not necessarily culturally. These are books that are going off-site into our off-site storage facility, and this is kind of where we get new donations. The unboxing is one of my favorite parts. It feels like Christmas for me. It's a mixed metaphor, but I love opening the boxes and seeing what's in there. This is our printing press exhibit. Have you heard of the newspaper The Forward?
Yes.
So this linotype, which was created or invented in 1884, which revolutionized printing, yada yada yada, made it much faster. This was used by The Forward, which was like at its heyday one of the biggest Yiddish presses of its time.
Right.
So this, do you have any guesses on the last year that The Forwards used this linotype? Last year.
I bet it was ridiculously recently, like 2000 or something.
Well, that is one of the best guesses I've received. 1991 is the last year.
Interestingly, the reason that The Forward was the last, probably the last paper ever to use the linotype wasn't just because they were stubborn, but because they were ardently pro-union. And the union, it says, avowedly socialist, The Forward was unwilling to defy its union. The paper's typesetters continued to cast molten lead until 1991, when the last union member retired and the paper replaced 18 massive lead-spewing machines with a single Macintosh computer.
This kind of extension of the book center was added in 2009, but this is our like performance gallery, and this is where we have Yidstock each summer, which is like a 4-day klezmer music festival. That's so much fun. Highly recommend. It's all like old people, and then there's a bunch of like, there's like 20 college students dancing in the back. It was, changed my life.
One of the most famous Yiddish authors in his day, as well as today, is Sholem Aleichem. He's known mostly for his Tevye the Dairyman stories, which became famous because of the play and the subsequent film, Fiddler on the Roof. The Tevye stories were written in real time. Sholem Aleichem would write a Tevye story every few years to address some social crisis that was going on in the Yiddish-speaking community, whether this was the revolution, intermarriage and assimilation, or violence and pogroms. Sholem Aleichem would write a story about Tevye and how he and his family were addressing these issues. As readers read this, they were amused, they were inspired, sometimes they were outraged, but they were very popular in the day, and they're really worth reading now. You opening this, because it's almost got like a Willy Wonka feel.
The innermost sanctum of the Yiddish Book Center. So this is the vault. This is where lots and lots of our books are stored, and kind of the more valuable, rare books.
No, this is just a nice peek so you can see what's going on down here in the vault. And oh boy, I can't wait to see it.
I have lots of goodies to show you. I like to call this my office. This is kind of where the fellows and I do a lot of our organizing. Like you'll see here, these are like music books that we tackled as a project. So the little treasures I pulled that I thought maybe you'd be interested in. So this, kind of circling back to the linotype from upstairs, this is an edition of The Forward that I pulled. Any guesses what this says? You can use context clues.
The war's over? Hitler dies?
Hitler is dead.
Hitler is dead.
Hitler is toit. So I was like thumbing through newspapers, and I was like, this one's too good not to show, especially at the Yiddish Book Center.
Yeah.
This is a children's book called Lobzik. It's about a socialist dog in New York City that helps kids fight for free lunch. So if you want to look at the little drawings inside, it's painfully adorable, and I can't wait to one day have a dog to name it Lobzik. This is the Crisco cookbook adapted for the Jewish woman, so there is no kind of, non-kosher stuff. This is the smallest book in our collection, the teeny tiny Yiddish dictionary.
Wow, look at that.
It's very rare. I wish I could have one and carry it around with me, but alas, I can't. Any guess who this fine fellow is?
About Shakespeare?
Shakespeare, yes, Shakespeare's sonnets.
Sonnets.
Yes.
Or it's not the rewritten Romeo and Juliet where she doesn't kill herself.
Yes, no, it's just the sonnets. But this is a rendition of the Jewish King Lear. So this is kind of like a take on Shakespeare written in Yiddish, which is similar and fun.
And it's called the Jewish King Lear.
Der Jüdische König Lear. This book's really interesting, I find. So this book is called, I'll keep it in there. So it's called Yiddische Dichterins, which means Yiddish poetesses, I guess. So just like women poets. It was written by Ezra Corman in 1928. It's kind of the first anthology of women writing in Yiddish, female Yiddish poets. So why I love this book is, Ezra Corman kind of gathered all this like biographical information about these women, and in the book he hand pasted in their portraits to each of. So imagine getting a library book and you see hand pasted pictures. So it's incredibly rare and delicate, and let's see, like that. This is a book written by Avram Sutzkever, who's like a beloved Yiddish poet. It's called Sibir. It was written while he was in exile in Siberia. And it was illustrated by Marc Chagall, so it's like poetry. So it's this beautiful illustrations that he did for the book. They're just like breathtaking. It's a book of poetry. So this is pretty rare art book that I love. If anyone out there on the internet has one they want to give me as a gift, I'll accept. Yeah, this is our typewriter collection. It's kind of like recently been organized, but we have the typewriters of several like famous Yiddish writers, including Aaron Lansky. In the 20th century, there was a puppeteer troupe called Zuni Mod, or Maudie Cut Puppets. So Zuni Mod and Yossel Cutler, and they had a Yiddish puppet theater. And we, thankfully, have the remnants of their puppeteering kind of out of collection. I'm not going to take them out because they're super rare and fragile, but you can see like,
oh dear,
very scary. And this is like real human hair and eyelashes.
Oh wow. Yeah, they're kind of they're charming and incredibly creepy as well.
This one I think is the mouth is supposed to move. Oh, there we go. So spooky, but I love these. The golden age of Yiddish literature took place from 1890 to 1970. So all the books you saw upstairs, all the books you saw in here, were kind of written in this really short span of time compared to other languages, which kind of makes the story of Yiddish even more kind of magnificent.
Right. One of the things that I found most intriguing and interesting about Yiddish is that its literature is a modern literature, that it's not until the late 19th century that people started writing stories in Yiddish. It was sort of like a spoken language it was a spoken language for 1,000 years before people started actually writing in it. It was sort of the language of the marketplace, of the housewives, it wasn't a language of scholars, which would have been, of course, Hebrew.
So this book here is critical to, it's a little broken, critical kind of to the development of Yiddish as a written language. So this book is called the Tzena Urena, and this is a book that would have been one of the first books to have been written in Yiddish. It's the Torah kind of translated into Yiddish for women. Right. And so in many copies, not this one though, there would be like inscriptions in the inside that say like this book is for men and this book is for this book is for women and for men who are like women, which is kind of a peculiar inscription today, but it just means like for uneducated men who couldn't read Hebrew. So that's why they would be reading the Torah in Yiddish.
Many Jewish intellectuals turned to Yiddish, to this kind of denigrated vernacular, as a way of creating a thoroughly modern literature and exploring not just religious themes as they had done in Hebrew, but exploring Jews themselves. Who were these very unusual people who kind of were scattered around the world and were living lives quite different from those of their neighbors, despite obvious similarities. What was this all about, and what was their impact on world culture?
The development of Yiddish as a written language reminds me of Dante, who wrote the Inferno in Italian as opposed to Latin, and how that was very unique and extraordinary because it was the spoken language, but it wasn't the cultural language.
There was a certain stigma to writing in Yiddish at first because, it was this vernacular, it was a kind of common language. But gradually, what did McLuhan say, the medium's the message? The more that intellectuals wrote in Yiddish as a way of spreading Enlightenment ideas among the Jewish masses, the more they got turned on to its artistic possibilities, and that in turn shaped their politics and their worldview. So it became, as you suggest, increasingly radicalized as a result of that.
You said you took Yiddish classes here. Why did you decide you wanted to take Yiddish classes?
Yeah, so I grew up only like an hour away from here, and I did like a program here in high school that was like interesting. And then when I got to college, I was really into Arabic, and I really wanted to do Arabic. And so I was trying to find a way to study Arabic in the summer. And they're all really expensive. And then I was like, oh, remember the Yiddish Book Center or something? And I Googled it, and it turns out they had like a free 7-week Yiddish intensive over the summer for college students. And I was like, okay, like I like learning languages. Like I'm Jewish, I guess I'll go learn Yiddish for free for a summer. And then it just like totally changed the course of my identity, life, academic studies, and I've just been like obsessed with it ever since.
We kind of lost track of our own history, and we kind of forgot who we were. So we kept the religion intact more or less, but we lost a great deal of our sense of self. And it's only now that it kind of took a new generation, you know, to feel comfortable enough in their own Americanism to go back and pick this up and figure out what it's all about. So we now do programs all over America in conjunction with public libraries, programs to explore immigrant literatures, of which Yiddish literature is one part of that. We have very ambitious programs to translate Yiddish into English. 2% of all the books here have been translated so far. 2%, 98% are basically unknown to English readers. So we started training translators. Now we've started our own publishing house called White Goat Press to make these books available. Somewhere along the way, though, a young guy on our staff came up to me. It was right after we moved into this building, so it would have been 1997. And he said, a lot of people are coming into the building now. We had closed stacks before, in the old warehouse. And he said, and they see all these books and they want to buy the duplicates, and they want to take them home with them. But we don't have enough copies of many titles to go around, and I think we have to do something about it. And he said he had just read an article about digitization. He said, and he thought that might be able to solve the problem. Duane, I got to tell you, this sounds ridiculous at this point, but in 1997, I didn't know what the word digitization meant. Like, I really didn't. Like, we forget how quickly computers have overtaken our lives, but that hadn't started yet, at least not in my world, at that time. Another young person came up to me, this is maybe 5 years later, and he said, I think the internet's finally fast enough that we could literally put these books online.
Well, you should definitely come to the Yiddish Book Center. You don't have to come to the Yiddish Book Center to enjoy reading Yiddish books. 11,000 or more of their titles are online at www.yiddishbooks.org.
So we've really made the literature available. I think it's safe to say at this point that Yiddish is the single most in-print or accessible literature on the planet because so much of it's available. But it's not enough just to reclaim history. What do you build with it now? What comes next? Where's the new creativity? I'm pretty sure the new creativity can't happen without standing on the shoulders of giants, without knowing what came before. Just like, Norman Mailer didn't write without knowing Shakespeare, right? I mean, it's not possible to do that. However, by saving the literature, we also help to foster new creativity. So I think you got to, stand by and let's see what happens next. That we're not quite sure of yet.
Before I left the book center, I wanted to make sure I stopped at the gift shop. Get yourself your own Ziggy the Goat. Here's a great gift. She swallows books like dumplings. We've got finger puppets of famous Jewish personalities: Sholem Aleichem, Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, and of course the Mensch, Mr. Spock. All right, I've had a great time at the Yiddish Book Center here in Amherst, Massachusetts. I've stopped in the bookshop, which is a great little bookshop and great little store. I've decided on buying classic Yiddish stories. I'm also picking up a hat, Yidstock. If you're here in July, Yidstock is a 3-day festival of Yiddish music. It seems certainly worth coming to. Also, don't forget to read Aaron Lansky's book, Outwitting History. I found this incredibly engaging, interesting, often very funny, and all of these are available here at the Book Center. I've had a great time here. I'm Duane from Travel by the Book TV. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Keep reading, keep traveling, keep watching.